Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football and Locked On Oregon, still correct? I mean, you're
Yes,
double
indeed.
dipping, making all that money. Spencer, from an outsider's perspective, from a national's perspective, Tennessee begins spring practice on Friday. What do you think about the Vols right now in terms of what you want to read about or maybe see highlights of on YouTube? What do you want to hear or see from Tennessee this spring, kind of from a national lens?
I want to see Nico Iamaleava fulfill the DJ Uyunglele articles of years past. He's comfortable. He's focused. He's finally ready for a Heisman campaign, which is one of my favorite running jokes on Twitter of all time because we did it for about 4 seasons. But for Nico, that's I think the most pivotal aspect to me for Tennessee this year. Yes, you lose Dylan Sampson and a couple of wide receivers, replacing guys along the offensive line. Sure, those are all valid questions to ask. But end of the day, the Tennessee defense was great last year. And they go up against Ohio State, and you find an offense who's clicking. And Tennessee did not have the ability to go toe-to-toe with them. After a hot start early in the year, once they got into SEC play, the offense really struggled, and it was because the passing game was not consistent enough. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. I think it was 6 games that Nico had under 200 yards passing, 5-6 games in that
Something
sort
like
of
that.
range. And that's not sustainable. Like they were carried by a great running game and a great defense last year. But now that you have potentially some changes on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, one change in particular, no James Pierce, of course, and a big change on offense with no Dylan Sampson, and you're working in new wide receivers. You have to have your quarterback take that step forward. So what I want to see in here coming out of Knoxville is, hey, Nico looks like he is much more comfortable, like he is making quality reads, that he's making good on-target throws. And it's not as if we never saw that last year. We just didn't see it consistently. So that position to me is the one I look at and say, boy, this is where Tennessee has to be able to take a step forward if they want to get back to the playoff, because once again, it's going to be competitive. And we saw last year 9-3 doesn't get you into the playoff. And if you get to 10-2 again, yeah, you're going to be there. But I think that's the biggest question to me for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my biggest offseason, point for the Vols. It's, Tennessee's got a lot of questions on the offensive line at wide receiver with Ricky Gibson, Jamal McCoy at corner. I mean, there's Tennessee. I said this on yesterday's show. Josh Heupel is entering this spring practice with more questions than he's ever had outside of his first spring when he was hired, in late January and, thrown out there, a couple of weeks later. I mean, there's a ton of questions right now, but you can overcome so many of those questions if your quarterback takes a step and like we think, Nico is capable of. Now, last year, Nico certainly, needs to get better, more consistent in some areas. Boy, it was not all his fault. Those wide receivers last year were not good, simply not good. And it's up to the quarterback to make them better. I get that, but he didn't have a lot of help at points and times in that regard. So I'm with you. I think the biggest thing this offseason, Nico has got to take that step, and I think that he will because, gosh, he's got – you talk about just pure intangibles and traits. I mean, he's, top 2, top 3 in the country of quarterbacks that I want. Let me ask you this. Quarterbacks returning in the SEC or just quarterbacks power rankings right now. Where you got Nico in the SEC?
Well, I would not have him number 1. I'd put Garrett Nussmeier in that slot.
I would too.
The SEC is really fun when it comes to quarterbacks this year because there aren't that many known commodities. There's Garrett Nussmeier. And I know we want to declare Lenoris Sellers a known commodity. I still have a couple of questions there. I know he's a great athlete and a fantastic runner, but like Nico, can he take that next step as a passer? Or you look at Marcel Reed over at Texas A&M, or you look at Jackson Arnold at Auburn. Incredibly talented guys, but I haven't seen them put it together for an entire season. I'd have a hard time ranking my top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and leaving Nico off because he has proven for all the questions that you and myself and many others have about him going into this year, fairly so, he still has answered more, doubts necessarily that that other quarterbacks just haven't had the chance to do quite yet. Like, what do we actually know Jackson Arnold can be? Because we saw him in the bowl game in an Oklahoma uniform against Arizona 2 seasons ago, and it was, he turned the ball over too much, but hey, this is great. Look, he went for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. This is then he's getting benched halfway through the year. And I've got Oklahoma fans telling me I'm ridiculous for saying, hey, I don't think Jackson Arnold's a problem here. And what do you know? They end up hiring a new offensive coordinator, bringing a new quarterback in. And even with Oklahoma, who brought in, I thought, the best transfer portal quarterback available this cycle in John Mateer, I haven't seen him start in the SEC. I watched him play a Mountain West adjacent schedule last year and against a couple of legit teams, or bowl teams, at the Power 4 level in Texas Tech and Washington. Mateer guided the Cougars to a win. And I think he's really good. But yeah, there's a massive step up in competition for him there. So I think he benefits of sorts if you're going from a ranking standpoint, Nico does, that is, from just a lot of question marks around the rest of the league. But when you give me the same offensive system, head coach and play caller, and a quarterback who's, played an entire season already as a starter, I like your chances to take that step forward. But, even Arch Manning at Texas, it's like, I know what the potential is, but Nico's proven more than Arch has at this point in time. Arch might have the same ceiling, but like he hasn't proven anything yet.
You lead me into my next question. Like I was, let's not forget Nico was the starting quarterback for a team that won 10 regular season games and went to the college football playoffs. Yeah, 100%.
And nobody else can say that. I mean, Nussmeier, LSU was 8-4 last year, and I thought Nussmeier was really good and not always the problem for the Tigers there. So like he's my clear-cut number one because I'm a big fan of his. But like outside of that, got questions everywhere I look.
There's a whole lot of questions. I would have Sellers too. I would have Nico in my top 5. But I'm seeing these rankings where Diego Pavia is ahead of Nico, or the Arch is ahead of Nico. Like Arch is nothing but potential.
Diego Pavia is the father of the state of Alabama, so at least
true. He's a guy that I want to see play college football for 20 years. I mean, I love the story and all that, but like from I'm going to take this quarterback or this quarterback. I mean, like, what are we even thinking here? It's no contest. I want to relay all that into Arch. We kind of touched on it. Potential's there. He looked good in spurts last year in the roles that he played. I'm seeing Arch, top 3 quarterback Heisman odds, and kind of getting the Nico effect from last year. Top 3 quarterback Heisman odds, or number 2 quarterback in the SEC. It's like, dude hasn't proven a thing yet. But from what you've seen from Arch Manning, how good do you think he can be, and where do you think that he kind of stacks up against Nico, who he and Nico were 1-2 in that quarterback class?
Yeah, I think Arch Manning can win the Heisman Trophy. I don't know that he does that this year. Sark is a good offensive play caller and has plenty of creativity that'll make it easy for him in certain ways with, play calls that they have and, the way they utilize the screen game and all that sort of stuff. And Arch is, a really talented guy. But let's not forget, Texas's season got extended to the college football playoff semifinal because of a 4th and 13 where Quinn Ewers showed his veteran moxie to make a big play. Where he saw, they're not going to back out of this blitz. Let's switch into a max protection, give my guy one-on-one, and I know where I'm going with the football, gives an on-time, on-target throw to a future NFL wideout in Matthew Golden. Does Arch Manning have those sorts of things? Is he ready for that? I mean, he's been sitting for 2 years, so hey, maybe he does. But there is still a learning curve. When no matter how long you sit, you're always better in your second or third season with those little things and the details. And Nico has a head start on Arch in that regard. So between the two, I don't know that I like either one to be a Heisman finalist this year, just because I need to see what Tennessee is able to put together with their receiving core and see how the whole team comes together and what the season will end up looking like. But for Arch, I just question, is he ready to step in and just boom, take over college football, or is he going to have highs and lows, kind of like DJ Lagway this past year at Florida, a guy who I think I should have mentioned by now in this discussion, because he's someone who I'd probably slide ahead of Nico just barely in the SEC quarterback rankings, because that was a tough situation that Florida had last year. They were able to navigate it pretty well, and he's also a former 5-star recruit and a mega talent.
Yeah, I completely forgot about him too, which is funny because we talk quarterbacks on the show all the time. My one thing about DJ, who I think is a great talent, I think he's got a turnover issue. He's got 11 touchdowns, 9 picks last year.
Yeah.
you need to focus on that in his sophomore year, and I'm sure that he will. Got to get you out the door. I know you got to go teach a class, Mr. Professor. But Spencer, where can we find all of your work on Locked On College Football every single day?
YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On Ducks as well. If you're curious what's going on with Oregon, check that out wherever you're listening to or watching this show. And I'm on Twitter at SMcLaughlinCFB if you want to tell me that
Duck can pull the truck, baby. Go support it. Spencer, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, anytime.